Santelli with the Santelli Exchange. Hey, Rick.
Go. I'll tell you what, everybody's buzzing about the emerging markets, and I want to weigh in, but from a much more macro, kind of oversimplified level. All right, the emerging markets, for the most part, are in the news big time for a very simple reason. Now, stimulus by central banks isn't necessarily the only reason or a lack of future stimulus, but it certainly has made the condition a little bit more critical. So when we splash water everywhere, the emerging markets have to deal with it. Investors, are trying to put this capital to work. It's relatively inexpensive capital, and it goes to maybe ideas that wouldn't normally find capital. But what happens when taper talk begins? It was the catalyst for some reversals of that and some rather large ones. While I'm speaking, you can look at one-year charts of the Mexican stock market, which looks like a giant Elliott wave pattern that's going to continue to deteriorate. We could look at what's going on in Indonesia. We could look at what's going on in India. I mean, these stock markets really don't look pretty. Take it a step farther. The main issue currently is funding, but it's funding everywhere. But think about it specifically from emerging market countries. They have large current account deficits. The capital that's once plentiful is not nearly as plentiful. Now, what happens eventually is that we have to decide, are the central bankers, specifically Ben Bernanke, are they responsible for the U.S. or are they responsible for the world? In other words, how much thought is going to go into the notion that the catalyst of some of these emerging market reversals are on the shoulders of some of these central banks? Now, remember, we've all heard this analogy. Think about it, that the U.S., and maybe to some extent Europe, they're the cleanest shirts in a closet filled with not-so-clean shirts. Well, what does that imply for these guys, the dirty shirts? Okay, we don't think about it. Let's reverse it a bit. The dirty shirts indeed could create an environment where if we don't see the developed economies, fixed income government markets like tens, like gilts, if we don't see buying come in because of what's going on in the emerging markets, because there's other issues, the mousetraps are snapping, then, in my opinion, the real key here is it might be time to play a little defense. You heard it on the Santelli Exchange. Back to you guys.